It's time for the top real estate news with Develle Morrison with Bosley Real Estate and host of the Morrison Report podcast. Develle, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's absolutely a pleasure to speak with you again. So real estate season, or I guess mini real estate season, will soon be upon us. How is the fall market shaping up to other years from your experience?
Well, I would say this fall market, we're sort of on tender hooks. I'm expecting a lot of supply in the market, but there's still a question about how many buyers will come to the market given where interest rates are right now. And there's also the issue of on September the 6th, the Bank of Canada has another rate announcement.
Right.
So I think everybody is sort of waiting to see, is there going to be another rate hike or not? Because that's really going to affect the buyers out in the market. And quite frankly, it's going to affect some of the sellers. In terms of some of the sellers, it's going to make them want to sell simply because the rate might be too high for them. So it will be an interesting time.
Yeah. What do your tea leaves tell you in terms of a rate hike or stay the same? Or is there anything that you're anticipating?
Well, I'm concerned that that inflation jumped up again. So because we know that that's what the Bank of Canada is looking at. So I am concerned that there could be a rate hike. I'm not going to make any predictions. But I am concerned about that. I think that that's a valid concern for people to be, I'm going to say concerned again.
Exactly. They want to keep it top of mind. Of course, they want to keep that very top of mind. And for those who are considering, they're listening to this and they're like, should we, shouldn't we? Maybe we should sort of set things up so that, so that the table is set for when they do want to go in the market, they do it properly. Is there anything that, if they were going to talk to you today, is there any advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I would say go see a mortgage broker, number one, and get that mortgage broker to see if they can put a rate hold.
Okay. Great advice. Great advice. So let's talk a little bit about some real estate stories that are top of mind for Torontonians, starting with something called, the housing crisis. You've heard of that. So at the end of the day, people are wondering, is it the provincial governments to blame? Everybody wants to point a finger somewhere. Or should we even be pointing the finger anywhere? Is it anybody's fault?
It is people's fault. I think what's interesting is that there was a survey that was done where Canadians basically said they don't know who to blame.
Right.
And 40% of them said they would blame the federal government and 32% said the provincial government. And I'm going to say it's the fault of the municipal government. But I do think it's important for all three levels of government to work together, work with housing experts and developers to actually figure out how to solve the housing crisis, because I don't think it can be solved in a vacuum. And I know, this week there were meetings in Charlottetown and the Trudeau government was meeting, trying to come up with some solutions for housing. But the challenge is that whatever they come up with, I shouldn't say whatever they come up with. The challenge is that so much of the housing issues fall on the municipal government. And so for the federal government to sit there in a vacuum and trying to come up with solutions, I don't think is really going to work.
Yeah.
Other than if they want to just give the municipal governments more money, great. That solution does work. But I do think that this is something that requires all three levels of government to work together.
100%. And it falls on the municipal government today. But 30 years ago, it may not have.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But when it comes to zoning, permits, all of those things, those are municipal issues. And those, I think, are the biggest issues in terms of stopping more housing getting built. So, the federal government, sure, they can do something, but I really think the something they can do is to open up their wallets.
Great point. Great point. Well said. And speaking of which, there was a Liberal cabinet retreat recently, and they emerged from it with not so much. No new policies. Develle, as a person in the business of housing, what do you make of this?
Well, again, it goes back to they're not speaking to the right people. They're not getting experts around the table who can help them come up with some solutions. But what I am hearing is a lot of scapegoating, right? So now we're trying to pin this whole thing on foreign students. And I remember, years ago, first they tried to pin the housing crisis on foreign buyers. It was all their fault. Then it was the fault of all the vacant homes. It's all their fault. And then it turns out we don't really have that many vacant homes after they did their survey.
Right.
Then it was the fault of investors. Oh, my God, there's so many investors buying condos in the city. And so now it's the fault of foreign students. And so to me, the problem is the scapegoating. We keep trying to point the fingers at everybody else. We don't seem to want to learn the economics of supply and demand.
Yes. Do you think?
So to me, I feel like, can we just re-enroll all these politicians into an economic class at university and speak to some economic professors about how this actually works, about supply and demand, and that we simply need to create more supply because we know we have lots of demand. So I think we need to stop the scapegoating, because when we do that, we don't solve the problem. We just scapegoat, blame it on somebody else.
Yes.
The problem doesn't get solved, and then we're back to square one.
And we just kick the can down the road.
Exactly.
And meantime, Mayor Olivia Chow on Thursday outlined a plan to build an additional 25,000 rental homes. And there's some details in there, but on the surface, this feels like some good news. Does it to you?
Maybe. I mean, I think it's a great idea in print. To me, it's, can they actually execute it, right? So it sounds great to say that. Yeah, of course, we need all those spaces. There will be affordable rentals, great, under the city's rent control, wonderful. But I'm going to say who's building them. I remember when Olivia Chow was running, she was talking about the city becoming its own builder. Well, that concerns me, because I don't think that the city can do that effectively. I do think that they need to partner with a private developer who can get those units built faster and better. If we look at, the partnership with Daniels in Regent Park, that was highly successful. There was a partnership, not with affordable housing, but with Tridel, with the North Toronto School, also executed very well. So I do think that they need to partner with private developers who actually know what they're doing, because the city it doesn't.
Yeah.
And if we go back to, those affordable homes that they're building, they talked about the fact that they've sort of made those housing now sites have finally been approved. But I would suggest that they need to go back and intensify those sites, because I would imagine that maybe they're not building enough units in those sites. So maybe they're not building high enough.
Right. Makes sense.
And we know that we need the volume, whether we have refugees seeking asylum, or, if we look at all of the forest fires that we've seen in Canada, but around the world, I think the next thing that we're going to need to grapple with is climate refugees.
Exactly.
People who no longer live where they've been living simply because of climate change. So if we don't get on this page of building more housing rapidly, this isn't going to end well.
So you must have heard the news about the Ontario government entering a process with the province's secondary school teachers union to avoid strikes and helping kids stay in school. You must have heard that.
Yeah, I have heard about that. I mean, I'm not 100% familiar with everything around that.
Of course.
Obviously, it would be great if they could come to an agreement. I guess I'm wondering, why is this coming up right before back to school? Why wasn't this done in the summertime when there was no pressure?
Well, maybe because pressure is part of it.
I guess, but I still kind of go back to that. But I think that let's pay our teachers more money if that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, right.
I think that we all know the cost of living has increased significantly for everybody, and that's why we're seeing a lot of strikes in a lot of different.
Yes.
So pay teachers more money, pay nurses more money. Like, let's just
give people what they deserve.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I don't understand why we're debating this, but of course we're dealing with the Ford government too.
It feels like there's an inverse relationship between the social value of the job and how much it's paid.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, given everything that's going on in the world, we know that our teachers are needed and necessary, and underpaying them, I don't think is the right thing to do. But, it's interesting because the minister, Stephen Lecce, I think from what I understand, he actually got schooled in the private school system and not public school. So I also find that a little interesting.
Good point. As I scratch my chin here, if I was on camera. Thank you for that. So just a bit of a pivot, Devel. Do you go to TIFF?
Oh, so I actually used to work there.
Really?
Yeah. So back a long, long time ago, I want to say maybe 20, 25 years ago, I actually worked full time in the sponsorship department at TIFF.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I go to TIFF usually every year. Now I'm sort of spotty, but I love it. I love going to see movies. It's such an amazing experience.
It's such a great event for Toronto too, right? So much fun, a little bit of glamour. And apparently, though, speaking of sponsorship, they've lost the Bell sponsorship.
Yeah, so I think that this is really a huge loss for TIFF. I mean, I understand why Bell is, taking a step back. Obviously, everybody's got budgets to deal with, but I think it's going to be hard for TIFF to find another company of that size.
Yeah, there's not a lot of them in Canada, right?
No, there isn't. And it's not just about the money that Bell was giving. Bell was also doing a lot of other things outside of just the money donation for TIFF. So, hopefully they can cobble together a number of other companies to make up for that loss. But I do think it's going to take a few companies to make up for the loss of Bell and not just one company who can fill their shoes.
Sounds like it. And do you have a favorite TIFF memory that comes to mind?
Well, I have many. So one of the things that I used to do when I worked there was I would handle the sponsors for the gala. The gala's at Roy Thompson Hall.
Fancy.
And so I would have to introduce the stars in a gala, in one of the galas, to my sponsor. And then they would get a chance to sort of chit-chat with the big-name celebrity. So that was probably one of the coolest things I've ever done. So I got to meet Brad Pitt, who I have to tell you is much better looking in person.
Okay.
I'm shocked.
Okay.
And, after I introduced him to the sponsor that night, he spent some time with the sponsor, but then he also went and spent some time. There was a little girl in the green room who was part of the Children's Wish Foundation. And he went and he spent some time with her. So I was amazed, and I was like, Brad Pitt is awesome.
We all knew he was. I'm a big fan of Brad Pitt. And speaking a little bit about telecommunications companies, Bell's not the only telecommunication company in the news. Some Torontonians can now get 5G network services on the TTC, but they have to be a Rogers customer. If you're a Bell customer or a TELUS customer, you're kind of out of luck.
Yes, and I understand that they're negotiating to try to change that, and I do hope they do, because I do think that this is a matter of life and death, and so everybody should have access to Wi-Fi in the tunnels. I don't understand why it's only certain tunnels that have the Wi-Fi, though, because they had listed off that, this was only in Line 1 station north from Union Station to St. George, and it was the Bloor Young plus the Dinah and DuPont station. So I'm not exactly sure why it's not in every station. I do hope at some point it is in every station. Every cell phone provider gets to make use of this. But I do think it's a matter of life and death, and it should have happened like yesterday. Yesterday
or last year or something, because apparently we're in the 21st century.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. And the fact that it's just Rogers, I'm skeptical about how willing Rogers will want to play in the negotiations now that they seem to have a monopoly on 5G access in the subway.
Well, before, I believe it was Freedom Mobile, if I remember correctly, which I kind of think, well, they're not really that much of a big player, and how many people are serviced by Freedom. But again, I just go back to, this should just be for everybody. It shouldn't just be for one company.
Yeah.
Sure, whatever. This one company is going to lay down the wiring, the cabling, whatever it is. But I do think that this should be everybody. This
Agreed.
Shouldn't just be one company at all. Just like I said, it's a matter of life and death at this point.
It's a safety issue.
It's not a marketing issue. It's just get in line and be a good corporate citizen and make it available to everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so a little bit of a pivot around shopping.
Yeah.
And
Indigo Books.
Indigo Books and booze.
Yeah.
Apparently it's a thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love that idea. I hope it's really successful for them. Recently I've seen that they've had significant losses. They've had many of their board members quitting. I love shopping at Indigo Books. In fact, I was in there this week at their Yonge and Eglinton store, and I noticed how quiet it was. And it was kind of sad.
Yes.
One of those places that I really do like, but I thought, I really hope this store doesn't close down. But again, seeing the significant losses that they've suffered, I like this idea that they're going to be implementing alcohol. I'm disappointed that they're only doing it at their new store at the Well.
Yes.
So that's down, front at Spadina. I think they should just go for it and put it in all the stores, just to kind of revive the energy in the stores. Because, like I said, this week it was just dead.
It's a great idea. And for those who are listening saying, wait, what? There was a news release issued saying that a new 16,000 square foot store will open in the Well development area. And this store will offer an edited selection of Indigo's curated assortment of books, with a focus on lifestyle products, records, plants, home decor. And there will be a gourmet coffee truck offering pastries, snacks, beer, and wine. So a question for you, Devel. Would you go out of your way, because this, I think, is the intent, would you go out of your way to shop at a place that offered what Indigo will be calling an elevated experience? So sort of like destination shopping.
I'm not going to go all the way down to the Well. The traffic around Front and Spadina.
Yeah, good point. Yep. Pack a lunch.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nice idea, but I mean, there's a lot of condos in that area, so it'll be great for the people that live around there. I think that's why I was saying, I really hope that they just expand this concept everywhere. Get it to Yonge and Eglinton, get it to the Manulife Center store, get it to the Eaton Center store, get it to all their stores. Because, if I look at the Yonge and Eglinton store, there used to be a Starbucks in there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that created a lot of life and activity. And now that the Starbucks is no longer there, it's just all closed off, and you just think, this is terrible.
It's kind of sad.
It is. It's really sad. You know what? You need that coffee shop to be in there.
Agreed.
And so if they're going to add alcohol, great, bring it on. But I think they need to do it sooner rather than later, given what's going on with the lack of profits of the company. Because at this point, I just wonder how much longer is it going to last?